Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Catalyst webinar series presented by the Southern California PGA Education Committee. The Catalyst webinar series is a bi-weekly educational platform for creating success and change in your club and career. We are very excited and proud to introduce Mr. Kurt Keebler and Tom Wallace from Copland, Keebler and Wallace. It's an executive search firm, one of the better known and more successful executive search firms in the country. Kurt joined the firm in 2007. It was Copland and Keebler at that time. After a highly successful career managing clubs and club communities for more than 28 years, he has earned his CCM. Kurt's club career includes appointments with Tavistock Group in Orlando, Florida, where he was the general manager and COO of Isleworth Golf and Country Club. And Tom Wallace, also CCM, CCE, and ECM, and partner to Copland, Keebler, and Wallace. Tom has been with the firm since 2014, and when he became a partner in 2016, and that's when it became Copland, Keebler, and Wallace. Served as a club management at some of the country's most recognized private clubs. Tom's club management career spans also over 25 years in private golf, country, and community club industry. Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you for presenting to the Southern California section today. Welcome.
John, thank you very much. It's Kurt Keebler here. I'm going to open and turn things over to Tom here in a moment, but good morning all, and thank you so much for the invitation, John. We look forward to sharing some thoughts with you, and certainly we want to make ourselves available for any questions that any of your members might have who are on this program. A little bit about us and our firm. As you did a very good job of, Dick Copland started the firm 23 years ago, and we've grown from Dick and Nan in a office in Scottsdale back in that point in time to where we actually have 13 people involved in our program now. And even since what you're seeing on the screen went out, we've added a couple of additional people out there who can provide additional industry insights and capabilities, competencies, and such. We get to travel around an awful lot of the country throughout the whole year, and what we're going to share with you here in a minute is really the foundation of what our firm's focus is, what insights we gain from all of the search work we do all around the country. And a good amount of our search work, as many of you may know, is in the GM COO side of the business, but increasingly over the last many years, many of the clubs that have worked with us on a GM COO search have come back and said we really enjoyed that process and the outcome. Now we're looking for other roles out there and have engaged us to, whether it's the director of golf, head golf professional, director of agronomy, and many other different search competencies out there. We've really grown that side of our business practice, and frankly, now it's to the point where a number of clubs with whom we've never worked have reached out to us on one of those other non-GM COO search areas and verticals, and we're doing an awful lot of those. You might imagine most of the clubs with whom we work, because a little bit different financial model with the focus that we put into conducting a search is pretty time and labor intensive, and therefore it's a little bit more costly than perhaps just putting an ad out there. So most of the clubs that we work with, and we only work in the private club side of the industry, but most of the clubs that we work with are pretty iconic, well-known clubs, and therefore we like to think that we work with some of the best and brightest out there. So it's a little bit of the foundation. I'm going to let Tom Wallace jump in here now and tell you a little bit about our process, how we go about getting engaged, work the process with our various clubs, and then tell you after that more about what clubs are looking for in this day and age. So Tom?
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. What I thought I'd do is just take you through what we do on our end if we're engaged, for example, for a director of golf search, how we go about getting things started. And I'll start with due diligence, and Kurt and I will go back and forth, but the first thing we want to do is we want to find out from the club. We'll send out a survey. We want to find out from the powers that be at the club, whether it's the search committee, the board, the key department heads. We'll send a survey to kind of find out what they're looking for in their new director of golf. What are the attributes and the skill sets that are really important to be the director of golf at Acme Country Club? And we send that survey out. We get as few as 5 or 6 responses. We've probably had as many as 50 or 60 sometimes in certain positions. So we find that out. Then we send a pretty lengthy request for information to the club. We want to find out as much as we possibly can about the club. We want to be your Chamber of Commerce, so we're going to want to look at your event books for the golf shop. We're going to want to look at your training manuals, your bylaws, everything, the financials. We want to make sure we can talk to any candidate and fill in any gaps that they might have about whether or not this is a good fit for them. So that is part of the due diligence ahead of time. Once we get the survey information and then we get all of the club information and we've absorbed it, then we'll come on property and meet with the board, the search committee, and the key department heads, and we'll spend a day getting to know the club a little bit better. Now we know it on paper before we arrive, but we really want to understand what the culture of the club is, because we can find hundreds of great directors of golf that can do the blocking and tackling, but what we really want to find, and where I think we do a really good job, is we want to find the right cultural fit for the club so that they can come in and be very successful. And that's really what we're digging in on when we're on property for due diligence. Once we've spent the day, we will, like I said, we will talk to all the key department heads, the search committee, the board. We'll leave there. We'll compile all of the information that we've gathered before coming on property, the information we gathered during the day of due diligence, and we'll put together a position profile, which sometimes tends to be a little bit lengthy because we're going to want to put in a little bit about the club history, a little bit about the part of the country that the club is in, and then we want to put in the blocking and tackling, but also the very specific things that the club's looking for in their director of golf. So it could be anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 pages, and we'll get that approved by the club, and once they approve it, then we'll go out to market. I'll let Kurt talk about recruitment here in a second, but communication is very important throughout the process. One of the things that we think we do very well is we work with the club or the golf facility and help them communicate to their customers or members that that we've been hired, Kaplan, Keebler, and Wallace has been hired. Here's what you could expect. Here's the timeline. We spend all of our time making sure that everybody's well connected during the process. So it takes maybe anywhere between 4 and 6 weeks to recruit, and I'll let Kurt talk about that, but we are engaged with the search person, whoever that search chair is, board president, general manager, whomever is leading the search, and we make sure that we are engaging with them at least on a weekly basis, letting them know how the search is going so that they can communicate to their folks within the membership. We have lots of communication templates, but the biggest thing for us is just keep in touch with those leaders at the club so that they can keep their members advised as to how the search is going. And once we start that, then we go out and start recruiting. And I'll let Kurt talk a little bit about how and what we do when we start to recruit.
So lots of different ways that we get the message out there. And many of you probably on this webinar are familiar with our website, have perhaps signed up to be made aware of any new search that we start. Is everything that we do is open. We will not do a confidential search in any category. If the club has not yet made known to whichever role it is, professional, that they are looking to make a change, or when the club initiates it, and as all of you know, there are certainly a number of searches that we do where somebody's moved to a better job or is retired or such. But if the club has initiated the change, we will not do a search unless they've made that person aware of it. So you will never see a confidential search for KK&W. So therefore, everything that we do is very open to the world, meaning it starts on our website, a very thoughtful profile, including a video profile of the club is done for every search that we do. We've got something like 8,000 people in a constant contact database, and may not be candidates for this, but we like to think we've got 8,000 talent scouts out in the world who may know somebody that we don't, or may remind us of somebody that we do know, but just haven't connected the dots between point A and point B in this search that we're doing, and make us aware of that person as somebody we should reach out to. We also, between Tom and myself, have close to 50,000 LinkedIn connections, which again is kind of a talent recruitment source for us. And thankfully, and perhaps many of you have seen this just in the last week or so, we've worked pretty closely over the last couple of years with Scott Kimmig and the leadership team at PGA headquarters. I live in Jupiter, Florida, not far from current PGA headquarters. And we've spent a lot of time over there talking about the fact that any executive recruitment we do for director of golf, head golf professional searches, there's never once been a time that we haven't looked for a PGA member as part of it. So one of the things that we've encouraged them to allow us to do is to promote those searches through the PGA network, which some of you may have seen just in the last week or so. Sawgrass Country Club came through, Dallas National. We've got a couple of more that are going to be announced here in another week or two. Jupiter Island Club in Jupiter, Florida, where I live, is going to be a search that we're undertaking here in the next, well, we are right now, and it'll be announced here shortly. So there's a lot of different ways that we get that message out. Once we do that, though, all of us on the team, as we start new searches, have a bit of a discussion about who it is that we see could be potentially in good alignment for the role. And that's going to be a key piece we come back to on the next slide is alignment and, frankly, self-awareness of what the club's looking for and how that aligns with what you've done and what you're good at. Is one of the things that is really important to us is that you think about how you align and put yourself in the shoes of a search committee member or a decision maker and what they're looking for, because they're excited about what you've done in your background, but if that's not what they're looking for, it really doesn't matter what you've done in your background. So again, we're coming to that on the next slide, but important thing to underscore once again. So we really spread the message out there, plant a lot of seeds, and we start having a whole bunch of conversations to really dig into whether someone's desire matches their experience, their history, the reasons why. One of the real key things that all of you should keep in mind when working with us is the fact that when we can often align competency and skill set, but frankly, if a search doesn't work in the end, if a candidate is unhappy or the club's unhappy with the candidate, almost always it's not because of the competency and the ability to do the job. It's almost always because their personal lives don't match their professional alignment with the role, meaning, family, mom, kids, husband, kids, whatever it might be, just never acclimate to the new area. So we're looking for you all to be very thoughtful as to the area and why that would be beneficial to you in the 60% of your life that you're not at work. Is that going to work or not? So we want you to be conscious of that, and frankly, tell us about how it aligns. So we're going out there casting a wide net, coming back to the club with the candidates. We're hired by clubs to be the initial gatekeeper and vetter of candidates. So they're not looking, when they hire us, to look at 100 resumes. They're looking to have us make the initial cut. So frankly, we've got to be confident and be convinced that just because somebody's passionate, enthusiastic, and et cetera about the job, that they really have the right reasons and are good fits, not just because they raise their hand and say they want to be selected for it. Typically, what we're doing is coming back to the club with a lot of information that we have garnered from candidates. And in that information that we're presenting, in addition to what you would expect, a thoughtful letter of interest and alignment, why me for this role, a resume. Again, we're going to talk about those in greater detail in a second. We also have candidates complete a fairly lengthy questionnaire that we've developed that, frankly, several of the questions are pretty common to every search that we do, and they're leadership or experience questions, but every club has something that's unique, whether it's to drive greater growth of the game at their club, greater participation with each of the constituency groups, whether it's juniors, kids, ladies, men, high handicappers, low handicappers, 9-holers, 3-holers, whatever it might be. and we're going to ask questions in that questionnaire about what you've done, how you'd approach a certain situation, and so on. So, and we also put together a bio on any candidate that we put forward. So there's a lot of information that gets conveyed to the club on the finalists that we're recommending, that they have engaged us to vet through and to bring them, in our opinion, who we think is best suited for this role and why. They go through that initial process, and typically we're presenting 10 to 12 candidates for a director of golf search. You know, there are times when we presented 18. Pretty unusual though, because it's difficult for a committee to sort through that. Sometimes 8 to 10. But you can imagine from there, almost every search we do, or searches that you may be involved with at times, have, you know, they're not going to interview 12 people. They're typically interviewing 4 or 5 out of that group of 10 to 12 that we present. And that's where we then facilitate the process, and I'll let Tom tell you about the process from there.
Right. Well, so when we put together the presentation of candidates to send to the club, we're going to share the questionnaire Kurt talked about. We're going to share your resume, your cover letter, but we're also going to put a little summary together as to why we think, as the search executives, that you'd be a good fit for the job. So we'll present, like Kurt said, it could be as few as 5 or 6, as many as 10 or 12 candidates to the club. We'll send that to them. We'll allow them several days to kind of digest all of the information. And once they've been able to study all the information about the candidates, we'll get on the phone and we'll talk them through selecting down to 4 or 5 to bring in for in-person interviews. Now, part of the process is when we send them the information, we also give them some tools to help them separate and rank the candidates based on the criteria that we've discovered are important to them during due diligence. So they will send us their rankings prior to the phone call, and we'll use those rankings as kind of a guidepost as to who really resonated with them, who may not have resonated. But again, everybody we present, we believe could do the job, and we believe they're a good candidate. But ultimately, and we just want to underline this, it's the club, it's the business that we're doing the search for that does the down selecting to who they want to bring in for in-person interviews. So we'll help them. We'll get on the phone for an hour or 90 minutes and help them select down to 4 or 5 folks. And once those 4 or 5 are selected, we'll go ahead and let those that weren't selected know so they could move forward in their with whatever else they're looking into, any other opportunities. But those that are coming in are then put through another layer of things that they have to complete before the in-person interview. We will put them through a personality assessment called the Plotkin XT, which really takes a look at your emotional intelligence, your business intelligence, just kind of your personality and leadership style. All of those things will be asked during the Plotkin test, which typically takes around an hour to complete. We'll also start deep backgrounding, and I'll let Kurt talk about the importance here of making sure everything is accurate on your resume, whether it's school graduation or certifications. We do deep backgrounding checks because that is of the utmost importance to us, that we don't have any surprises with any candidates that we present to a club.
So on that, you know, one of the things that we would strongly encourage everyone to be very conscious of is that we actually do that work. And if you have something on your resume that, for example, the most egregious one over the years has been claiming that you have a degree when in fact you never graduated. And I think people at times think that we're not going to check that. We have found 29 candidates over the last 13 years that I've been part of the firm that have falsified on their resume that they actually had a degree when in fact they never graduated. And the excuses for that have been pretty comical over the years when we call somebody on it and they become honestly, a file 13 forever candidate. You can't go back on saying I thought I graduated when in fact, you know, who of us doesn't know whether or not we graduated or not? It's a pretty hollow excuse. And honestly, very few clubs require that you have to have a degree. They prefer it, but very few require it. But it's an integrity issue, and if you misstate it on there, and there's a lot of ways that people try to make it look like they've got a degree when in fact they never graduated. That misstatement of fact is, again, most egregious there, but it often shows up in other areas. We want you to be very conscious, and I'm, again, probably jumping ahead a little bit here on the next, what we talk about on the next slide, but important that you recognize that your resume and your letter of interest have to tell a story that is compelling enough to say, I want to meet this person. And in that, we don't want to have in your resume, for example, we don't want to have a narrative of what your job description is. We want to know what your impact has been at the club, and we want it to be full of actual, verifiable facts that represent your positive impact. One of the things that we have gotten after candidates on at times is, the classic bullet point in an achievement under a particular role is, during my watch, we significantly increased the number of participants in golf. Well, that word significant means nothing unless you quantify, because you could say, well, I have 10 more people playing regularly now than when I started 18 years ago. It's not a major difference, but without some quantification of what that actually means, it's a hollow throwaway and frankly, very low self-awareness statement in our minds that if somebody hasn't put themselves in the shoes of the reader, they know what they're talking about, but the reader doesn't. And you really have to be conscious of that sort of thing as you put this all together. So anyway, we go through a lot of background information. We will do court record filings, checks. So if you've had a bankruptcy, a foreclosure, it's not a disqualifier, but you got to tell us that stuff up front, because we can't manage it effectively if we don't know about it. And again, it's not a disqualifier, but as you can imagine, most times you're going to be entrusted with a pretty significant operating budget. And if there are some flags out there that say you can't handle this with your own personal finances for some reason, that's a trust factor that we've got to manage around. We do criminal background checks, as you would imagine, and both state and federal. We do driving record checks. So you've got to sign off and allow us to do all this stuff, or you can't be a candidate for us, because it's all material information. Tom noted the personality and behavioral assessment. We do degree verification. We do credentials verification. If you've suggested on your resume that you've achieved certain levels of certification within the PGA or outside of the PGA, we're going to make sure that not only did you attain that, but that it's still current. Tom and I are both CCMs or CCE in Tom's case, and in order to maintain those credentials, those acronyms behind our names, we have to have ongoing CEUs that we achieve every 5 years out there. So we make sure that all of that is done. You have to put together a portfolio at that stage, also, as if you're one of the finalists. So there's a lot of information that needs to occur. I'm going to let Tom pick up how the actual interviews now go.
Right, and then there'll be 2 interviews. Obviously, there's the first interview with the 4 or 5 candidates, and from that day that we're there on property and we facilitate the interviews. And at the end of that day, our goal is to get it down to 2 finalists that will come back and spend a significant amount of time in the director of golf position. Oftentimes, for the second interview, no worries. The second interview, we'll have you come back and maybe do a lesson or do some playing. So it's very important that we're there and facilitating the first interview. For the second interview, however, we're typically not there, and it's the candidate and the club getting to know each other a little bit better so they can make their final choice between the 2 final candidates. Moving on, we will always, once the interviews are done and the club has made a decision, we will work on the agreement and get this thing over the finish line. That's part of what we do, is we negotiate with the candidate and the club to make sure that you're starting off on the right foot, and any negotiations that could get a little sideways happen between KK&W and the candidates, not with the club. Now, that's kind of a quick 20-minute story for really a process that takes about 10 weeks. But there are some parts to the process that I want to just spend a little more time on, and Kurt and I have touched on a little bit. And I think Kurt did a really good job of underlining how important it is that your resume tells a story and it's accurate, and you're looking at it not from your perspective, but from the person that's doesn't know you at all, never met you. They need to be able to read your resume and completely and clearly understand what you've accomplished in your career and how you've gone about doing that. I think your cover letter is very important. Kurt also always says a thoughtful cover letter. We see so many cover letters that are generic and they just trade out the names. It's really important, I think, that you look at our profile, and when they say they're looking for specific things, you need to put that in the cover letter that, hey, I understand you need these skill sets and I bring these skill sets. And that's the kind of thing we'd like to see in a thoughtful cover letter. The questionnaire, it doesn't have to be really lengthy and verbose, but you need to make sure you answer the questions completely. This may be the only opportunity you have besides your resume to show these folks how you think and how you lead. So when you are answering those questions, you could probably, you should be thinking, this might be my only opportunity to really sell myself. So you don't want to go over the top. You don't want to lose them in an answer, but you want to make sure you answer fully and in the best way possible. A portfolio is, for us, it's 40 pages of, and I always tell everybody it's a little bit different. I want to see the things you're most proud of that you've accomplished in your career. For general managers, it might be one thing. For directors of golf, it might be another. But we're going to send them 40 pages with a table of contents, and we want you to share with us the things you're most proud of. So, I've had people send me 39 thank you letters. That wasn't the most creative, but it certainly worked. But we can send you samples of some really great ones, but you really should. It's your opportunity to really share with folks beyond it's almost like a cover letter, if you will, with pictures and items. So training manuals, really great events that you've put on, really great initiatives that you've had at your club to grow the game of golf and things like that. All those kind of opportunities are there with your portfolio. We also do the testing that Kurt talked about is something that really does, we're willing to share that with you after. We're willing to send you the results so you can take a look at it. It's not something we would allow you to take again, and it's not something you could study for. It's just something that's going to really take a good look at you. One of our goals for our candidates and for our clients is to make sure you feel good at the end of the process. We want to make sure you know the club in 360. We want you to know everything about the club, and we want our clients to know everything about the candidates. So it is a long process. There's a lot of work to it. But when we turn over those, let's say, 10 candidates to the membership, we want to make sure we are giving them a 360 view so they completely understand you, your background, your schooling, what you've accomplished, what your future goals are. That's really our goal. And one of the other things we do for directors of golf and general managers and many of our other searches, in the second interview, if you're one of the two finalists, you are going to have an opportunity to present yourself either through your playing golf, giving a lesson, but we will at some point ask you to take control of that second interview and lead them through something, whether it's a presentation. It could be anything. It could be, hey, give us a 30-minute presentation on your merchandise plan for the club. Give us a 30-minute lesson. Whatever the club really wants to see from you, we're going to, at some point during that second interview, ask you to make a presentation. So it's really important that you understand that that's coming. Again, we can give you templates for that, but we really don't like to prescribe it. We like the club to tell us what they're looking for, and then we'll go ahead and give you some direction on that.
I'm going to jump in just a couple of thoughts on several pieces there. In our process, if you become one of the candidates that's presented, you will most times, not always can we do this, but 98% of the time, we've got quite an accumulation of documentation that we're able to share with you, from org charts to operating budgets to bylaws to marketing materials to golf calendars and you name it. We believe you need to be a well-educated candidate if you're going to sit in front of these folks and have thoughtful, substantive discussion with them. So, whether we're involved or not, you should frankly, ask for that kind of information, even if a club is doing this on their own or somebody else is doing the search. You need to be a well-educated candidate. A couple of other things. On your letter of interest and alignment, if for some reason you are not currently working, whether it's your choice or a club and when I say club, something that, is frankly, a little bit of a bugaboo for me is that a lot of golf professionals will talk about my facility. I have never once heard a private club member refer to their club as my facility. And I say this because I would hope that you might get that word out of your vernacular, because most club members are hoping that you are more personalized in your focus, and the word facility, quite frankly, is kind of a generic word that to most search committee members, because they brought this up to me countless times, why does he keep saying my facility when it's our club? Something to be considerate of. Anyway, if you're not currently working at a club, your choice or somebody else's choice, and you want to apply for a position with us, and frankly, I think for any position out there that you apply for, whether we're involved or not, you must, and I underscore and bold the word must, address the white elephant in the room and explain why you're not currently working. And, again, it may be because you've been terminated, it may be because you've made a conscious decision to make a move and so on. If you don't explain it, it's a white elephant that will likely be a really difficult one to ever allow us to put you in front of somebody. But it's almost always an immediate disqualifier to a search committee, because the natural assumption is, uh-oh, what went wrong? And, people in this day and age understand if the focus change, if the fit is no longer right when it was right, 5 years ago when I got hired. But if you don't address it, it's almost always a negative. Candidates have said to me, well, I thought I would explain that in my interview. I can almost guarantee you that you will never be sitting in front of them in a personal interview if you don't explain it first in a thoughtful manner in your letter of interest and alignment. Other things to be thinking about, whether it's on your resume or in the letter of interest, you've got to focus on the metrics, and you've got to put yourself in the shoes of the reader. Too many times we see, Acme Country Club. Well, there's about 47 Acme Country Clubs in the country, and I don't know anything about your particular Acme Country Club. You haven't even noted where it is. You haven't given me, is Acme Country Club 9 holes or 72 holes? Are you doing, 1,000 rounds a year, or are you doing 100,000 rounds a year? Is your operating budget $1.2 million, or is it $8 million? You need to put the metrics of your club in there. You need to tell them where your club is. You need to be thoughtful. And frankly, in this day and age, there's a lot of hit and miss on titles in this day and age. If you're a number 2 and have the head golf professional title, you got to make that known to someone, because there's too much skepticism out there, with titles. More typical, a director of golf is the top person, but even then, we've had some directors of golf who weren't the top person in the golf operation. You got to let people know what the organizational chart is, and be very candid and upfront about that. So that's the entire search process and the information that we are looking for. And if you have questions at the end, I think John's going to take some questions that are typed in on all this, but hopefully that gives you a pretty good idea of the overview of our process and involvement.
Yes, I wanted to just share with you briefly. We have a couple minutes before we wanted to wrap up and allow for questions. But one of the things that we added in here in this presentation is just, what is it that we hear from the board, search committees, and decision makers? What is it that they're looking for in their next leaders? And we're in the leadership business, whether it's a director of golf, a head chef, a general manager. They're always looking for the same skills and attributes. They're looking for great leaders. So they're looking for, someone obviously that knows retail, tournament management, instruction. Those are the blocking and tackling I've talked about. You have to have those skills. But they also want a visionary. They want someone, as the game of golf struggles in certain parts of the area, that knows that it is struggling and knows that they have to be creative and find a way to get people back engaged in the game of golf. Whether if it's a executive chef, They want them to be creative in a culinary way. They want a visionary. No longer they want someone in those leadership roles that isn't capable of leading the committee, leading the board, and not just taking orders from them. Obviously, you have to have great member-customer interaction. There's nothing worse for a general manager, for a director of golf, if they don't enjoy people and they like to, they're in their office more than they're out on the first tee or out on the floor with the membership. They want their leaders to be engaged with the membership as a whole. That means the lady golfers, the children, the junior program, all the way down. They want somebody that's happy to be engaged with all of the customers and all the members.
I would just tell you that from our perspective, and in all of the surveying work we do, which includes, again, as Tom's noted, the board, the search committee, senior staff, fellow department heads, sometimes influential members at large, the number one with the bullet of the 25 or so competencies that we ask folks about, whether it's playing ability, merchandise ability, talent, recruitment, development, teaching, instructional ability, etc. The number one with the bullet is sincere, engaged visibility and interaction with both members and team. And if you aren't focused on that, I can tell you the vast majority of searches that we do when someone has been terminated, it's almost a broken record the number of times we hear, well, our last, fill in the blank, whether it's a GM, a director of golf, in both of those roles, it's pretty common that our last was so involved in his office or her office that we never saw him, or they only gravitated to the folks that they wanted to play golf with. In the case of a director of golf, they didn't engage with every constituency group. One of the things, quite frankly, I talk about quite a bit when I'm in front of a group of PGA professionals is, in this day and age, in every statistic I've read, and you all have read, or your association has produced, has said the biggest area of growth in golf is in women's golf. And I still find countless numbers of directors or head golf professionals that download the involvement in the engagement and the oversight of women's golf to a number 2 or number 3 in the organization. It basically says to those folks that you're number 2 or number 3 in my mind as well, because you don't deserve me being the guy as the top of the food chain, the one that's engaged with you on a regular basis. You'd never think of doing that with the men, but it happens all the time with women. I'd encourage you to take a hard look at that.
No, thank you, Kurt. I'm going to keep moving quickly. Obviously, you have to know how to run the business. It's great if you're a great player, a great teacher. Being engaged with the members is great, but you've got to have a great business acumen and know how to run the shop and know how to run events so that they're profitable or break even, whatever it is you've decided you want to do. So financial management is very important, which also means being able to build a budget and stick communication nowadays. It's not about that newsletter article. It's your ability to be the conduit between the management staff and the board and the membership as to what's going on in the golf department. For example, as the director of golf, it's important that you are the number one source for all information about the golf program, what's going on, what needs to happen, where you'd like it to go in the future. So you have to be comfortable. Oftentimes now when there's a big golf course project, it's the director of golf and the superintendent that are making the presentation as to why the members need to give some money or be assessed. So you have to be comfortable getting up in front of the group and speaking to them. And if you're comfortable talking to your membership and to your staff day in and day out, it makes getting up in front of them and making a pitch like that easier. Obviously, accountability. Kurt mentioned one of the skills that's always at the very top is they want a leader that can come in and hold the employees in their area accountable. It's very important that you're able to set goals for your staff and hold them accountable for those things on a yearly basis. Boards and ownership groups are more and more driven by analytics and data, And if you're not capable of setting goals, measuring them, and reporting that to that group, you're going to struggle in the future, because accountability is important, and they want to do that through analytics. And it's important that you know how to set goals, measure the goals, and report on how you're doing against them. Integrity, I know that's an easy one, but Kurt talked about it with the resumes and things like that. You have to have impeccable integrity, especially hard to recover, like Kurt said. If you falsify something, if you're really want about a great junior program, but after 2 years, if you have no additional juniors playing in the program, and the program's not growing, then you can't execute. You haven't executed on that plan. You need to know how to work the plan and execute on a plan. One of the things employees, decision quality, one of the things employees always say to us, teammates always say, is we really want a manager, a leader that makes decisions. We don't want to be on a treadmill every day. We don't want to be stuck going nowhere. We want someone who's capable of making decisions, right or wrong, and living with them. And millennials specifically, you have to be decisive. Members want you to be decisive. Ownership groups want you to be decisive, but your team also wants you to be decisive. Nothing is more of a team killer and a culture killer than someone who is frozen and doesn't have the ability to make tough decisions. That's what they want from a leader. Detail oriented. I always tell the story about when we walk into a club, the things that I naturally look for, whether it's cobwebs, light bulbs out, things like that. There are just certain things you can walk into a golf shop. You can walk in onto the first throw of golf. You can tell a lot about the general manager by the little things. And go ahead, Kurt.
I was just going to say, go look. The first place that most guests to the club, too often the focus doesn't start there, because you don't spend a lot of time out in that particular area. If that doesn't represent the quality that you hope is found elsewhere, and is so often, or trash is around there, the focus and the responsiveness of the team that's out there just don't set a good tone for the rest of the organization.
Thank you, Kurt. Last couple here. Charisma. Obviously, we talked about your ability to get up and sell something. Just your ability to get people excited about choosing your club over another club, that and getting people goes a long way towards being a great leader. I would have changed this picture had I remembered. I'm from Cleveland, so you have to actually not have a good opening day, but I'm hoping it was just an anomaly. We'll see next week. You actually have to enjoy and get energy from the challenges that come at you every day in a golf operation or in a club operation. You have to enjoy that. So if you're not action oriented and don't enjoy working hard, that's going to come through in the interview. It certainly is going to come through in your ability to be a successful leader in the industry. You have to be a great change manager, because you know how often the industry changes. You know, something that you did for 10 years and could have sold out the next year, you could hardly have anybody sign up. You don't know what causes that. Our industry is constantly in a state of flux, trying to figure out what it is the next generation of member wants from the game of golf and from their club. So you have to be able to manage change, and that also comes with the changing of your golf chairs, the changing of your club presidents, the changing of your key staff. Really good directors of golf are putting out really good assistants every couple of years. So you have to be able to manage these new young interns you're bringing in and hopefully developing them. Just really important. All great leaders are great change managers. Again, we talked about the importance of being creative and innovative. Everybody, you have to find ways to get people into your club. Great leaders have great time management. We find that if you're not able to manage your time in this industry, oftentimes somebody says, well, I'm working 80 hours a week. That doesn't necessarily impress us as a leader. There has to be a reason. Either you have not staffed yourself correctly, or you're unorganized. There's no reason anybody should be working 80 hours a week. There are those weeks that you're going to work many hours, but no longer taking pride in how many hours you work. What we really want to hear and see is someone that really is structured and has given their life some balance. I'm never sure if there's work-life balance, but there's got to be some synergy between getting your time away to recharge. Somebody that's working 70 hours a week is not giving you their very best. So time management is the last of the skills that we really like to see and boards like to see in their leaders. So I think we've left enough time for any questions. If there is any, we'd be happy to take them.
John, are you getting questions coming in? We can't see them on our screen.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, gentlemen. Do you think it's as important to earn a CCM through the Club Managers Association to earn a GM job at a high-end club as it is to be PGA Class A status to earn a head professional or director of golf position at a high-end club?
I think most club decision makers, that the Club Management Association, Tom and I are at a conference for CMAA right now in Charlotte. We're up in our hotel room conducting this webinar with you. So, and we're card carrying CMAA members. Frankly, most decision makers, boards, search committees, etc., don't know what CCM means. They think it means country club manager. They don't know that it means certified club manager. We've had this discussion with CMAA for years that we've got to do a better job of educating the decision makers. The PGA of America has done a great job on that. Rarely, if ever, have we done a search where the decision makers haven't said to us, we want a Class A professional. I can't remember ever that not being that's the basic starting point. Most club boards have no idea that there's a basic starting point with CCMs. We're trying to improve that, but yeah, major distinction.
So would you say it's not as important as earning a Class A membership in the PGA? Because the growing trend in the PGA is many members moving towards general management, and the question of going into the Club Managers Association and starting the 6-year process to get the CCM, is it as important as it was to earn the PGA?
Well, I think it's a great question, John, and I may have mistaken what the question really was. If you want to cross over and move to the executive side of things, and we've worked with Dawes and Daryl and many of your key leadership team at HQ, and I think it's a misnomer in most quality clubs that not golf clubs, but full service country clubs and some golf clubs, frankly, want to know that you have a broad, rounded skill set of experiences, competencies, and awareness beyond just golf if you're making a crossover. And we're here at a conference with Eric Dietz, who's got his CCM, CCE, and is a Class A professional, and I think of multiples of those that we've placed into GM roles, but most of them are able to point to the fact that they didn't just go through the 1-week PGA GM certification program, and now they believe that they've got all the skill sets and competencies to be a GM of a broader role, a country club or golf club. So it still is helpful to get your CCM, but I think even more helpful is to be able to demonstrate competency and awareness in each of those other categories. You don't have to become a food and beverage expert, but you need to know and to be able to articulate how you're going to lead a food and beverage operation as one of many.
Thank you, sir. How do you handle the filling? Hold on, let me see. How do you handle the filling scenarios? One, a search committee would like to add a candidate once you narrow to the 4 or 5 finalists? And number two, how do you address a candidate recommended by a committee that has been a long-time employee that members love and feel would be a great fit, mainly due to the past performance and relationship?
Well, let me answer the second question first. If there's someone that the members want to put in, we put them through the very same process. So we will put them through all of the questionnaire, and we'll go through the interviewing process with them, and we'll put that person up against the other candidates that we're going to present. And we'll allow the search committee to decide whether or not, based on the other folks they're competing with, if they are someone that they want to bring in and interview, or if the other folks that we've brought in are significantly better in any way, shape, or form. Oftentimes, there's always an internal candidate, and we always say to the search committee, please don't put them through the process if you can't genuinely see them winning the job. If you can see them winning the job, then we put them through the very same process, and at the end of the day, the best person rises to the top. Certainly, do they have a little bit of an advantage? Yes, but they go through, from the KK&W side, they go through the same process as if they were an outside candidate.
And I would just jump in. Oftentimes, while they may have a perceived advantage, oftentimes what happens is there's still a question whether or not they can handle the buck stopping with them. And until you've gone off and had that opportunity, it's sometimes difficult for a search committee who are trying to do the best thing on behalf of their entire membership and be able to look any member of the club in the eye if asked that, yes, we did our due diligence, and so, while having less experience or less time in a buck stops with me chair, we believe that he or she is still the best person for the role. That gets hard, and it's kind of that catch-22 until you have the opportunity to sit in the chair. How do you get the experience? But sometimes it's better to leave and come back and get that experience someplace else. It's hard to be an internal candidate, quite frankly. It's not impossible, but I would tell you it's a small percentage of internal candidates who ultimately get the job, because almost always you're going up against somebody who's already sat in the chair and can articulate specifically what they did. And there's always a question, were you the one that did this, or was it your boss who did this? Even though they may know you and your boss, they still wonder whether it's the reality.
And I think your first question was, if someone comes in late, possibly, would we bring them into the process? We never stop recruiting until the process is over and someone is signed up. So if for some reason a great candidate comes up in the midst of the interview process, we don't like to do it, obviously, but we will not deny a great candidate because it doesn't fit our timeline. But it's got to be pretty compelling. Yeah, it's got to be pretty compelling, because we've been out there looking very hard and we've turned over a lot of stones. So it's very rare that we've missed someone completely.
So in terms of that in-house candidate that's brought forth, you conduct the due diligence and you find something damaging in the background or something false. How do you go about, what do you do with that information?
For an internal candidate?
Yes.
Well, that's an interesting question, John, because most times internal candidates, we make the assumption, and we tell this to the search committee, this person hopefully was vetted before they became an employee of your club. And I would tell you, while we'll interview them and take them through essentially the same process, we do presume that they have been vetted appropriately, and if there was something inappropriate in their background, that should have come up before they got hired. And certainly if it happened while they were at their club, that should have been made aware to whomever is in the decision-making role. So it's a little different level of responsibility and integrity checking at that point, because there's a natural assumption you've already done that due diligence, and we're not necessarily going to go to that level with an internal candidate. You should have done that already.
Right. So you guys don't really do the due diligence on internal candidates. What are we going to find if somebody's been with you for 5 or 6 years? What kind of references are we going to have that you don't see every single day?
you know, as a search committee member interacting with that internal candidate, we're not going to find anything at that point that's a surprise. You're going to know that in advance, especially that background referencing integrity issue.
And on the same lines as the CCM, how important is a 4-year college degree in your experience with executive searches?
Well, it's typically something that people, if you read most of our postings, we typically say it would be nice to have that, but it's not required. Would I tell you that it does give someone with it has an advantage? Yes, as the business acumen side has become more and more important, I think a college degree just shows, again, just like your certification, it shows a level of commitment and a level of understanding and education. Even if the degree is not in something specific to hospitality or golf, it just shows a level of commitment and education that you've taken on to make yourself the best leader you can. So it's not, we often don't require it. There are clubs that they specifically say we absolutely want to have someone, but it's still very rare that they say they won't talk to someone that doesn't have a 4-year degree.
Okay, gentlemen, that is all the time we have this morning. On behalf of the Southern California section of the PGA, we would really like to thank you guys for your time and effort in educating us this morning. For the ladies and gentlemen that are on the webinar, stand by for the Catalyst webinar quiz and the YouTube recording of this morning's presentation that'll be going out here shortly. Please take the quiz and return the quiz to Sharon Kerfman at the home office at skerfman@pgahq.com. A score of 70% or higher will earn 1 MSR credit for attending this morning's Catalyst. Mr. Keebler, Mr. Wallace, thank you very much for your time, gentlemen.
Thank you. Our pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Thanks all.
Have a great day. Take care, everybody.